This is a typical traffic stop. It occurs every day. A driver is pulled over for a small infraction, gets a short check, and then continues on their way. But not this time. This time, what began as a routine stop evolved into something far more unexpected. With confidence in his authority, the officer approached the vehicle. His tone was forceful, and his inquiries were direct. The driver, cool and composed, agreed without hesitation. It should have been over in minutes, but it wasn't. Instead, the situation worsened. The officer claimed that something did not add up. Suspicion took precedence over routine, and the cuffs were quickly removed. The driver was apprehended on the spot. But here's the twist. The truth about this arrest would astound everyone. A shocking revelation that would not only alter the lives of those involved, but also stir a conversation far beyond that street corner. Stay with us, for what comes next will definitely surprise you. What happens when someone pledged to protect and serve makes a mistake so significant that it challenges the very foundation of their responsibility? Consider this. A cop, trained to police the law and ensure justice, is caught off guard in an unexpected situation. A moment when judgment fails and assumptions take precedence. This is more than just a terrible call. It's about a decision that has far-reaching consequences, affecting someone's dignity, reputation, and belief in the system. How does a single inaccuracy spread throughout lives, communities, and even the very institution designed to ensure fairness? And more crucially, can such a mistake ever be reversed? This is one of those times that makes us wonder, what happens when the protector becomes the one who causes harm? The answer will make you question everything. The truth is not always startling. It can also be disturbing. What if the people we trust to uphold justice make a surprising mistake? This narrative takes an unexpected path, revealing more than just a faulty judgment. It strips back the layers of a system we rely on, revealing weaknesses that are difficult to overlook. But here's the thing. This is more than just one event. It's about what it represents, the issues it raises, and the difficult truths it forces us to face. Stay tight, for the conclusion to this story will make you question everything you thought you understood about justice, fairness, and accountability. It was a peaceful afternoon on a quiet residential street, a neighborhood where the sound of birds chirping and children playing in the distance fills the air. However, the serene tableau was broken by a blaze of red and blue lights. A police cruiser approached, behind a sleek black sedan stopped just off the curb. The driver had been stopped for what appeared to be a minor infraction, a routine check, nothing more. The cop walked outside, his boots clicking across the pavement as he approached the automobile. The hum of passing automobiles on a neighboring road was the only sound as he tapped on the window, setting the tone for what should have been a routine visit. But what happened next would make this peaceful neighborhood the setting for a narrative that no one would forget. The cop was a seasoned professional, respected by his colleagues for his thoroughness and acute instincts. He took pride in his thoroughness, often double-checking everything and trusting his instincts. To him, every stop was more than simply a routine. It was an opportunity to uphold the law and make the streets a little safer. He believed in his duty, which boosted his confidence. However, confidence can also obscure the distinction between caution and presumption. On this particular day, his intuition led him to a conclusion he knew was correct. A decision that would quickly turn out to be one of his most serious failures. The driver, a poised and composed black woman, reached inside her bag to grab her identification. She handed it up with unwavering calm, even beneath the officer's scrutinizing scrutiny. The officer examined the card closely, flipping it over in his hands. His brow furrowed and his tone changed. "This doesn't look right," he continued, doubt creeping into his voice. The woman stayed calm, her expression unchanged. "It's my ID," she said clearly, her voice firm. But the officer was not convinced. His misgivings increased, and the tension in the air became nearly palpable. What should have been a simple moment had now devolved into something much more disturbing. The officer's suspicion grew deeper. He returned the ID, but his tone became sharper. "Step out of the vehicle," he said, his hand hanging near his holster. The driver's calm manner began to deteriorate, replaced by bewilderment and fury. "Why?" "I haven't done anything wrong," she said, her tone forceful but controlled. "I need to search the car," the officer said, his tone leaving no space for compromise. The woman shakes her head. "You have no reason to search my car. This is harassment." Her refusal appeared to set off something in the officer. He quickly went for his cuffs. "You're resisting," he snarled, pulling her hands behind her back and locking the cuffs with a crisp snap. The driver stood motionless, her calm returning even as she was ushered into the back of the vehicle. The calm residential street had become the scene of an intensifying battle, which was far from done. At the station, the officer worked systematically, filling out paperwork and recording information on the arrest. To him, it was just another day on the job and another step toward upholding the law. He sat at his workstation and typed his report with precision. His confidence remained unshakable. He believed he had done everything by the book, and that his instincts had once again led him to the correct decision. He did not second-guess his conduct while processing the arrest. In his mind, he was simply performing his duties, ensuring that the streets were secure and the law was followed. But what he didn't realize, what he couldn't see, was that this arrest would soon turn into a moment that would haunt him, challenge his convictions, and reveal a mistake he never imagined he'd make. As the officer finished the final steps of processing, the woman, despite the circumstances, spoke up. Her voice was calm and demanded attention. "I'm Judge Serena Hawthorne," she stated, her eyes steadfast, "and you've just made a serious mistake." The room went silent. The cop froze, the pen slipping slightly in his grip. His confidence, which had been so strong just seconds before, began to shatter. "What did you say?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper, as if hoping he had misheard. "I'm Judge Serena Hawthorne," she said, her tone unchanged. The truth of her words struck the officer like a thunderclap, breaking his equanimity. The understanding was sudden and overwhelming. His face turned pale, his stance straightened, and his thoughts raced. In that moment, he understood it wasn't a mistake. It was the type of miscalculation that might alter everything. The room was entirely quiet. The station's regular hum, phones ringing, discussions, the movement of paperwork, appeared to evaporate in an instant. The officer stood motionless, the weight of her words crushing down like a big stone. Other cops and personnel exchanged awkward glances, their faces full of shock and dismay. No one dared to speak. As the gravity of the situation became more apparent, the air became thick with anxiety. This wasn't just an ordinary error. It was monumental. The woman, now seated with serene dignity, said nothing else. She didn't have to. Her very presence communicated volumes, and her words remained in the air like an unsaid challenge. Everyone in the room recognized that what had just happened would have far-reaching consequences, requiring answers and accountability. The officer's hands trembled as he stepped away from the desk. Panic overwhelmed him like a tidal wave. His thoughts raced, repeating every detail of the encounter, every choice, every word. "How could this happen?" he whispered beneath his breath, barely audible. The confidence he had felt just minutes before had vanished, replaced with a sinking sense of the enormity of his deeds. Without hesitation, he picked up the phone and contacted his superior. His voice cracked when he spoke. "We have a situation. A serious one," he began, striving to find the appropriate words. "The woman I arrested. She is a judge." As he waited for an answer, the room appeared to shut around him. Regret gnawed at him, and each second felt heavier than the last. He realized this wasn't just about etiquette. It was about making a mistake that may define his career and undermine the trust placed in the badge he wore. Despite the terrible treatment she had just received, the judge maintained remarkable composure. Her composure in the face of such a hardship was remarkable. She didn't raise her voice or strike out in rage. Instead, she sat there, her posture upright and her gaze steady. After a brief lull, she spoke again, her voice forceful, yet measured. "This isn't just about me," she murmured, breaking through the tension in the room. "This is about something far bigger. This is about the system that allows this to happen repeatedly to people who lack power and recognition." Her eyes glanced across the room, and her words landed with quiet authority. "This is about existing biases and assumptions based on looks and race. It's about how even incorrect assumptions may ruin people's lives." She wasn't simply speaking to the policeman in the room. She was getting to the heart of the problem, an issue with far-reaching ramifications that required attention and action. In that instant, her detention had become a platform for something far greater than the mistake that had occurred. She was no longer merely a judge. She was a voice advocating for accountability, contemplation, and reform. As word of the arrest spread, the atmosphere within the police department soon turned from bewilderment to anarchy. Senior officials struggled to deal with the escalating public relations catastrophe. Phones rang nonstop, messages poured in from the media, and the strain increased with each passing minute. In a back room, high-ranking police convened intense negotiations, attempting to control the fallout. They were well aware that the consequences of this error would be far-reaching, not only for the officer in question, but for the entire department's reputation. "This can't get out of hand," one official murmured while pacing back and forth. "We need a statement right now." The story had already made headlines, and public fury was obvious. The department's image was on the line, and with each new report, the situation appeared to worsen. Behind closed doors, the struggle to dominate the story became more intense. Was this an isolated event, or was it a symptom of a larger problem inside the force? Senior officials understood they needed to act quickly, but no matter how hard they tried to spin the narrative, the truth was out. An officer had committed a serious mistake, and the world was watching. The judge's voice broke through the commotion, firm and steadfast. She was not done. "This isn't just about me," she added carefully, each syllable having weight. "It's about the countless others who don't have the privilege of being recognized after the fact." Her gaze remained steady as she talked, and her words struck a deep chord. She was not only reflecting on her personal experience. She was advocating for those who, unlike her, may not have the power or status to affect the outcome of a comparable circumstance. "How many people are treated like this every day, without anyone intervening or noticing?" she said. "How many people are wrongfully arrested, humiliated, or worse, because of their race, appearance, or place of origin?" Her declaration was more than simply a plea for justice in her personal case. It was also a cry to solve a systemic issue that affected countless people, many of whom had no one to advocate for them. The judge's calm demeanor did not obscure the seriousness of her statement. She was utilizing her personal injustice to shed light on larger, deeper issues that needed to be addressed. The cop, now fully aware of the gravity of his error, stood before the judge, his expression a mix of regret and guilt. His hands were tightly gripped in front of him as he talked, his tone low but genuine. I am so sorry," he began, weighted with shame. "I did not intend for this to happen. I made a terrible mistake, and I realize how serious it is." He paused, as if looking for the appropriate words to make amends. "I should not have jumped to conclusions. I should never have treated you like this. I genuinely regret my behavior." The judge listened silently, her countenance unreadable. She did not interrupt, but her gaze never left him, as if she were evaluating his apology and determining its genuine value. However, as the officer spoke, there was a lingering concern in the air. Is an apology enough? The judge had been wrongly arrested, humiliated, and viewed with suspicion. While the officer's statements were earnest, the question remained: could a simple apology undo the damage already done? Could it rebuild the trust that had been damaged, not only between them, but also between the community and the system designed to keep them safe? The incident swiftly escalated into a national controversy, eliciting fury across the country. People flocked to social media, news sources covered the tale, and protests erupted in towns big and small. The public reacted quickly and strongly. This wasn't just about one officer's error. It was about a larger, systemic issue. Calls for reform resonated from all corners. "This isn't just a mistake," one protester stated at a gathering. "Here's a pattern. This is about how law enforcement treats Black and other people of color on a daily basis." The fury was not only directed at the illegal arrest, but also at the broader ramifications of what this incident revealed: the bias, preconceptions, and lack of accountability that continue to plague police enforcement. Experts, activists, and community leaders began to advocate for quick improvements. "We need better training for officers," declared one advocacy organization. "Training that addresses unconscious bias, that teaches officers to question their assumptions, and that holds them accountable when they make mistakes." The narrative had touched a nerve, and the discussion about police reform, accountability, and the treatment of underprivileged populations became more urgent. This was more than a single error. It was a wake-up call for a system that needed to alter. The judge's arrest was more than just one instance. It was a stark reminder of a much deeper, systemic issue that affects underprivileged populations on a daily basis. Unconscious bias and racial profiling are not limited to a single officer or department. They are woven into the very fabric of law enforcement and society. Every day, people of color face assumptions about their appearance, race, or heritage, which can lead to unjust treatment, discrimination, and even wrongful arrests. For the judge, it was an error that, while extremely unjust, was acknowledged and corrected. However, for countless others who lack the same recognition or status, the implications are far more serious. They face the very real prospect of being treated as suspects solely because of their appearance, with no recourse for the harm done to them. Unconscious bias affects all aspects of life, including work, education, healthcare, and even the criminal justice system. The very people who are supposed to protect and serve can inadvertently perpetuate the biases that harm the communities they vowed to defend. This tragedy served as a wake-up call not only for the cop, but for all of us. It forced us to face the difficult reality that, for many individuals, the system is unjust, it's not equal, and it's past time for a change. Instead of treating her personal experience as merely another sad memory, the judge transformed it into a powerful tool for change. She understood that her position and tale could shed light on the larger concerns confronting law enforcement. With grace and tenacity, she began speaking up, using her voice to campaign for reforms that would save others from suffering the same injustice. "This isn't just about me," she declared in a public statement. "It's about everyone who has been unfairly targeted, profiled, and treated with suspicion because of their race." Her approach revolved around two primary pillars: improving police training and promoting public awareness. She advocated for extensive training that addressed unconscious prejudice, teaching cops to notice and question their own biases before acting. "We need to teach officers to see people as individuals, not stereotypes," she added, emphasizing the value of empathy and critical thinking in all interactions. In addition, she advocated for increasing public awareness of racial profiling and its implications. The public must recognize the harm caused by these biases and how they perpetuate inequity. It's not only a police issue, it's a cultural one. The judge's activism was more than just holding one officer accountable. It was about using her experience to spark a movement for long-term reform. She will not allow this blunder go unnoticed. Instead, she was resolved to see that it resulted in genuine reforms for her neighborhood and everyone touched by the abuses she had observed firsthand. The judge's activism swiftly gained traction, and communities around the country rallied behind her. Social media was flooded with sympathy as people shared her tale and expressed their outrage at the terrible treatment she had received. Her calm, dignified approach to adversity connected with many, and her demand for reform struck a chord with others who had long advocated for change. "This is exactly why we need reform," a community leader stated at a gathering. "We can't continue to let this happen. We must stand with her and demand justice for all." Her efforts were praised in cities and villages alike, as residents, activists, and organizations joined forces to press for structural change. The message was straightforward: enough is enough. However, despite overwhelming support, the incident prompted intense arguments across the country. On one side, they supported the judge's call for change, acknowledging the systemic faults that had led to this point. They wanted better law enforcement training, stronger accountability, and more transparency. On the other hand, several backed the officer, stating that mistakes like this were a normal part of the job and should not be blown out of proportion. It was an honest mistake, some claimed. We can't throw away the entire system over one event. The discussions heated up as the subject continued to dominate the news cycle. People wondered if this was an isolated occurrence or part of a bigger trend of racial profiling and racism in law enforcement. And while the country was divided, one thing was certain: the debate about justice, equality, and reform could no longer be ignored. As the story progressed, an unexpected twist appeared. The cop at the center of the scandal issued an unexpected public remark. In an honest interview, he discussed the internal problems he faced in the aftermath of the tragedy. "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on what happened," he said somberly. "I never intended to offend someone or make a mistake like this. But the truth is that I've been carrying my own biases, which I didn't even realize were there." He spoke candidly about growing up in a neighborhood full with preconceptions and prejudices, and how, over time, he had internalized some of those ideas without even realizing it. "I felt I was performing my job, but I didn't realize I was acting on assumptions, and those assumptions harmed someone who did not deserve it." His statements were raw, and the vulnerability he demonstrated was surprising. He stated that prior to this occurrence, he had not completely grasped the impact of unconscious bias on the people it harmed. "I never realized how deep this kind of thing runs," he said. "I've realized that we all have biases, but it's how we deal with them that matters. And I failed." The officer's confession marked a watershed moment, not only for him, but also for the public. It demonstrated that even individuals within the system can be misled by their own biases, and that true reform frequently begins with self-awareness. His message was more than just an apology. It was an admission that he was willing to learn, develop, and do better. In some ways, his individual experience mirrors that of the greater reform movement. It wasn't enough to just admit the problem. The real work began when people accepted responsibility for their actions, learned from their mistakes, and committed to effecting long-term change. And in that moment, the officer's metamorphosis became a symbol of the hope that even the most deeply established problems could be handled one person at a time. As the dust settled, the judge spoke her final remarks, her voice firm, but full of determination. She had used her experience to spark a much-needed discussion about justice, but she was not done yet. "Justice isn't just about punishing mistakes," she insisted, her stare unflinching. "It is about learning from them. It's about recognizing our mistakes and taking efforts to prevent them from happening again. It's about both accountability and growth." Her statements weighed heavily, not only in court, but throughout the country. She was not asking for payback. She was calling for a reform in how we see justice itself. We can't keep sweeping mistakes under the rug. We must confront problems head-on, learn from them, and use that knowledge to build a better future for all. The judge's words rang true, providing a vision of justice that extended beyond punishment. It was a vision of growth, comprehension, and reform, one that prioritized healing and progress over vengeance. In that moment, she reminded everyone that true justice is not about perfection, but about being willing to learn, evolve, and create a system that benefits all people equitably. As the story concludes, we are left with a profound question to consider. If this can happen to a judge, someone sworn to uphold the law, how many others are suffering in silence every day? How many others, without the privilege or fame she had, are unfairly treated, stereotyped, and discarded merely because of their skin color or appearance? And possibly the most crucial question of all, what can we do to prevent this from happening again? The answer begins with us. It begins with recognizing our own biases, demanding greater training for those in positions of authority, and advocating for a truly equitable and just society for all. The true question is whether we will act now or let this opportunity pass only to repeat our mistakes tomorrow. The choice is ours.